Welcome to the show. It's New Thought Talk. I'm your host, the Reverend Steve Walling from the Spiritual Awareness Center, located in beautiful downtown Fresno, the heart of the Central Valley, the heart of California. A lot of heart going on here, and I'm glad to be with you today, and today is absolutely a great day. I knew that before I opened my eyes this morning, and I made that declaration as I stepped into the day, and, you know, life is unfolding so many wonderful ways that I can't even begin to share with you, but I got to tell you, I have no idea what I'm going to talk about today, sort of. I live about 50-some miles from the studio here up in the mountains. I left the city a long time ago and been up there not too far from Yosemite, and it's a beautiful place to be. But when I make that drive down here, come down into Fresno to do the show, oftentimes it's a time of meditation, thinking. And usually when I come down here to do a show, I pretty much have a good idea of what I want to talk about. But there's so many different things I wanted to talk about today, I thought we just kind of let things unfold organically. You can see I've got a whole bunch of stuff in front of me here, and it's kind of disorganized chaos, but we're going to make some order out of it. I've been talking about our relationship with Spirit, our belief, how things unfold in our life. We've talked about treatment. You know, for a New Thought, Science of Mind and Spirit student, all these things are very important. And it's very important to understand our relationship with that which we call Spirit or God. And when I say it's very important that we understand that, I don't think there's probably any spiritual teaching philosophy that doesn't place an importance on that. But in New Thought, in Science of Mind and Spirit, our relationship, our understanding of our relationship with the divine is that it is expressing as us, and it expresses as us by expressing through us. And so we believe that we interact with the divine principle, with God, at a very intimate level, basically 24/7. We've talked about recently how oftentimes a lot of that interaction takes place on a subjective, subconscious level, and how that affects our life with beliefs that we've held that we're not even aware that we hold, and how that plays out in our life. And there's a lot of evidence that that's so. So we're going to kind of look at that. We're going to look at our relationship with God. And I've got the Science of Mind textbook open to chapter 16, the principles of successful living, and ultimately I'm hoping to get to that point, because there's a lot of good stuff in this chapter. But I'm going to start with, let's see, this book here. This is How to Use the Science of Mind. I'm going to start with this on page 10, where Holmes writes, he says, when Jesus said that we should believe even before we receive, he was explaining the operation of the mental law of cause and effect. And we've talked about cause and effect. And oftentimes people get caught up in the idea of the law of attraction, and they make the mistake of thinking that that's exactly identical to the law of cause and effect. And it definitely is a part of the law, but it's not the entire law, and we need to understand that. He says if nothing is believed in, then nothing is acted upon by it, it being the divine principle or God. But since there is such a law, and since we are always believing something, the law will always be operating upon what we believe in the way that we believe it. It is not that we introduce a new law, but that we bring the law of cause and effect, that we are always using under conscious control, whether it be for ourselves or for someone else. We use this law of cause and effect. We use it all the time. When we seek to create in our life consciously, and we use this thing called affirmative prayer treatment, we go to an understanding of spiritual mind healing. What we bring to the table, if you were, when we go into that closet, that secret place, when we go into ourselves and we seek to become aware of the concept, the idea that there's but one, there's just one, that one thing that is the divine principle that's everywhere present. And as we begin to know the truth in ourselves, we know the truth here, that the truth is known everywhere within that one. And so we seek to create an understanding at that point. But the thing is, when we get there, oftentimes what we're thinking consciously is maybe in opposition to what we may hold on a subjective side. And we've talked about that. So, We're going to move on here. I want to get this. It says, this is out of the Holmes study courses, and this is the volume 3. And it says here, God is love, and we cannot get close to the nature of love while we hate. It is the hate that we have to surrender and not the love. When Jesus said you have to lose your life in order to find it, he was saying you have to lose your hate. We have to lose our hate if you wish to find love, and if you wish to let go of everything that is unkind, if you wish to discover kindness, even if you even have to surrender fear if you wish to discover faith. In other words, we have, and we come with a lot of stuff, particularly by the time we get to adulthood. We come pre-wired for fear. Now, Holmes didn't understand that at the time he was writing, because they used to believe that we were just hardwired for fear. I mean, that we just came into the world with 2 fears, loud noises and being dropped. Neuroscience today has showed us and told us that we're hardwired for fear. That's not a bad thing evolutionarily, because it protected us from things that were unknown, things that were new, that could be dangerous. But as we moved and evolved into a higher level of consciousness and a society based on higher levels of consciousness, that has not necessarily served us well, to greet everything with a level of fear. We know today that we can override that hardwiring, that there are ways and tools that we can use. And those are the tools that Ernest Holmes and the early pioneers of New Thought were teaching back in the day, but they're tools that today neuroscience has finally caught up to it. And the Navy spent a lot of money studying that, and I've talked about that in the past. And they found that there's things that that we can employ to overcome and to help rewire our brains in that fear thing. And the 4 things, and I'll mention them again if I can remember them exactly, but one of them is visioning. Well, we get that. Well, another one is goals, setting goals. Another one is affirmations, and the third one is something called arousal control, and that has to do with how we, particularly with breathing. Deep breathing can be a very powerful tool when we're in that moment, when the body tends to get tense. You stop, you take some very deep breaths. There's a physiological response in the body that takes place that automatically brings a certain level of calmness. Now, as we go through our spiritual day, as we utilize the tools that we've talked about on this program, or that you've read in books, or that you've heard at the centers of the churches that you've attended, you begin to change how you interact with the world, but you change how your brain interacts with the world, how your brain and consciousness interacts with the world, and you shift your position, if you will. And oftentimes, students in New Thought, they get to a point, but they don't go too much further. They get the idea that, okay, I can speak my word and I can create, things in my life, but we like to hang on to those things that our ego tells us that are righteous to us, if you will. And I don't necessarily like that phrase, but it is a level of truth that when we feel that we have it, we've got the knowledge, we've got the right, we've got the good, and we look out, whatever it is that we're looking out at, and we see what we judge to be wrong, incorrect, or whatever, we get a little full of ourselves. But when we go into the silence, when we seek to commune with the divine, which is at the core of our being, it's the center of the usness that we are. When we get to that point, there we find something that I just read is love. God is love. And we can't come there with our judgment. We can't come there with our hate. We can't come there with our fears. We can't come there with our anxieties. We can't come there with all the stuff that our 5 senses and our ego and our rational mind tell us are so important in the world. What we have to do is we have to come there with a level of surrender. We have to surrender ourselves to a greater good and a greater understanding. And that becomes very important. It's not comfortable if you're not used to doing it, but it's important. And the foundation behind all this is a book called The Hidden Power of the Bible by Ernest Holmes. And he says the 2 great commandments. The 2 great commandments are to love God and our brother man. On these things hang all the laws and the prophets. Love is a complete unity with life, and we cannot enter into this state unless we are in unity with all that lives. That's a tall order, isn't it? I mean, in unity with all that lives, and you know, you can, as you're watching this show, I bet you can muster up in your mind 50,000 different things that you'd rather not consider yourself in unity with, or maybe individuals, or philosophies, or whatever. The truth is, none of that matters and none of it counts. The idea, when we love God with all that we are, basically we're looking at all of what God is, and God is all. There's no place, no space where God is not, so there's no place, no space where our love should be restricted or held back. And within that understanding, if we love our neighbors, and I've said this many times, that commandment comes with no subscripts, no exceptions, no references to see below. It was stated as a wholeness. We love our neighbors, all of our neighbors, as we love ourselves. And of course, you know, the caveat that goes with that is that doesn't mean that we have to accept their bad behavior or be a doormat, but we love the individual, we love the being. So often in today's world, you know, we get caught up with all the stuff that's going on, and our side versus their side, or my tribe versus their tribe, or however we define ourselves. And you see, as soon as we define ourselves, we've already defined some level of separateness. And we need to move beyond this idea, this concept of separateness, in order to get through and get to the idea of a unity. There's just this oneness, this one. And the one is in, as, through, surrounds. There's no place that is a part of me or you or any place in between that it's not there. Our senses tell us we're separate. Society tells us we're individuals. Our rational mind and ego tell us that we are who we are, and how important is that? And we get full of ourselves. But when we come to divine principle, we come with a level of humility. We come seeking to love and to be loved. And when we do these things, we begin to embody them in our beingness, not in our intellect, but in our beingness. Things change in our life. We're going to take our first break here in a minute, and we're going to talk more about this, and we're going to talk about the idea of things changing in our life, and the idea of this miraculous thing that we call life, and its ability to unfold for us when we get to the point of aligning with its miraculousness, if you will. So I'll see you when we come back.
Prepare to be amazed by the magic of Elder. Kyle Elder is a fantastic entertainer who has been studying magic for over 20 years. Book Kyle and the Magic of Elder for your event, large or small. Kyle will make you laugh and mesmerize you with his magic. For more information or a free quote, visit magicofelder.com or call 559-917-4543. Kristen McIntosh is a real estate broker who prides herself on providing the highest level of service to her customers. Her enthusiasm for achieving desired results is an asset to her clients. Contact Kristen at 559-419-0333 and visit KristenMcIntosh.com. Voir dire, An Oath to Tell and Seek the Truth by Santiago Camarena, depicts the vicious cycle of drugs, crime, and incarceration. It argues that the media, politics, and our laws systematically contribute to this cycle. Get your copy of Voir dire at VoirDireStory.com.
CentralValleyTalk.com.
Welcome back to New Thought Talk. I am your host, the Reverend Steve Walling from the Spiritual Awareness Center located in Fresno, California. And it is a great day, and I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad to be here too. I want to go back here with something I read earlier, and we're going to go a little bit further with this. God is love, and we cannot get close to the nature of love while we hate. It is the hate we have to surrender and not the love. When Jesus said, you have to lose your life to find it, he was saying you have to lose your hate if you wish to find love. And that's, as we start our spiritual journey, that's part of the process that we got to get to. We have to lose that which we have held with hate. And you can look at hate not just as that thing that you have within you that is really, really ugly. I mean, we can kind of get that. But what about the thing that's in you that's just kind of mildly judgmental, that sets you apart from? Think about that. He says, you have to let go of everything that is unkind if you wish to discover kindness. You even have to surrender fear if you wish to discover faith. Everything that denies faith and love and life and truth and beauty, Jesus called a sin, a mistake, missing the mark. And we miss the mark in our life. I don't think there's anybody that doesn't want to seek to experience a life, a full life, a prosperous life, a healthy life, a happy life. And yet, so much of our life is spent in seeming struggle, if you will. I listen to people that talk about life being difficult, life being hard, life being harsh. And it's true, life presents challenges. But you were, and I was, we were all created to rise to the level of those challenges once we realize the truth of who we are. What is hard to an infinite power? What is hard to an infinite presence that has all knowledge and everything available to it? What can be hard to us as we begin to really actively participate in our life experience? We have to learn. We have to, as I've said, we have to develop the habit of spiritual practices and skills that, and someone questioned me on that once. They said, you talk about spiritual practices as a level of skill, and I do. And I think it's important that we develop that as a skill, but we understand that as we do that, what we're really doing is we're developing the skill of creating our personal relationship with the divine presence that is within us. And it's something that no one can give us, no one can do for us. We can only do it for ourselves. And at the level that we believe that we can, and the level that we participate in that's the level we'll reach and experience in our life. And as we do so, our whole perspective on how we interact and relate to life changes. We see things, life comes at us the speed of light for sure, but we see things differently. And the ability to meet life with a level of acceptance and know that ultimately that God and good is behind all that we have and all that we experience changes how we express and experience life. We're all individuals, and we all live life in our own individualized way, but there is a pathway that each of us can take to creating our personal interaction, our personal recognition of the oneness of which we are some aspect of. Living the Science of Mind. One of my, all these books are kind of favorite to me. That's why I go back to them a lot. I got more, but for today this will do. I want to read to you. It says, God is one. God is good. God wills only good. God is right where we are. God is within us, and God is around us. Pretty much sums it up, doesn't it? And he goes on to say this: the starting point for a clearance of the inward burdens that are too heavy to bear and the conflicts that tear so many people apart is to get clear in our own mind about ourselves and our relationship to God. If we see God as the guy, the guy in the chair, or that thing out there, or whatever, however we have related to God up until this point, as something separate from us, we'll always fall short. We'll always never be able. We'll always have to beg, plead, ask, and hope, and maybe not, we'll see God expressed in our lives. But if we understand that our relationship to God is not that God is out there, but that God exists at the very core, the center of our being, that the life that we are experiencing, the life that we are expressing, that is God expressing itself as us. Not with us, but as us. There's not me or you with God, there's just God. And you are an expression, and I am an expression. And when we reach that level of understanding, what is there between you and I that calls for judgment or angst or any of the other things that we see in society that keep us from experiencing the potential good that we can experience? And this is something that, and I've shared this before, that in reading Ernest Holmes' writings, he firmly believed that when we come to our true understanding of our relationship with the divine principle, with God, that we will see a change in the world. How can we hold something against somebody if we see them as just another expression of that which we are? Be kind of hard. Think about that. We'll move on here. It says, there is no other way, for the blind cannot lead the blind. As we seek to walk our spiritual path, there is no other way. If we put the blinders on in our life, and we see life as separate from us and us as separate from life, we're in for a bumpy ride, so to speak. We go on to say, and this now gets to where most of us really have to begin our work. Forgiving and being forgiven, loving and being loved, living and letting live is the simple basis for it all. Just to be yourself in God, just to be simple and spontaneous, just to live as though today is God's day and you may rejoice in it. Today's a great day. Did you start the day out today claiming the greatness of the day? The day's got to be great. The day is a gift to each and every one of us. The day is God expressing in our life the experience that we're going to express. And you can say, yeah, but, you know, and we've all got our yeah buts, right? But we can go through the litany of all the stuff that, the challenges that we have, the sorrows that we face, the distresses that we know are awaiting us, the lack and limitation, the disease, and we can run our list. When we start our day with the divine principle, it doesn't make those things go away. Oh, it may at some point, and I do believe that. But more importantly, what it does make go away is our old way of dealing and interacting with what comes at us through the day. How powerful it is to face something that heretofore had been considered an obstacle, an obstruction in our life, to be feared, to face it with a level of confidence, knowing that there's a loving presence and power that is our partner, that is our guide, that is the supplier of our good that's with us. Going into whatever it is that we're going into, knowing that we go into it and we're not alone, that when we open ourselves up, there is divine guidance, that we can be led divinely in it. It changes how we enter life each day, and it changes how life expresses through us each day and the good that it is. Remember, the two great commandments are to love God and to love our brother man as we love ourselves. On these things hang all the laws and the prophets. Love is a complete unity with life, and we cannot enter this state unless we are in unity with all that lives, for all of life is one. When we start the day with the idea that it's a great day and all of life is one, we're never alone. We're never separate. We're not, and you know, it just, as I share this, and I get excited about sharing it, because I see people that take these principles and put them into practice in their life, and at the level that they will put them into practice in their life changes and it unfolds. The purpose behind sharing this on so many levels ultimately is to see the change that takes place in individuals, and through them the change that takes place in life. But for people coming to New Thought, oftentimes, initially, a lot of it has to do with the idea of creating a successful life. I mean, we all want to be successful, right? We all want to be happy. We all want to experience the good. And if we've not had any interaction with New Thought, science of mind and spirit, religious science, oftentimes the initial thing that may trigger our interest might be the idea of creating a successful life. Now, that's not a bad thing, but I got to tell you, years ago, here in the Fresno area, and I may have mentioned this before recently, I don't remember, but I was telling somebody, Reverend Don Ringnes came to Fresno, and he was, I believe he was an RSI minister. And he had a small religious science church that he worked with, and it grew, and it grew. And when Reverend Don retired, he had a membership list, he told me, and he and I have had conversations in years past. He told me his membership list was somewhere about 1,200, and his Sunday gatherings would be anywhere from 400 to 600 people. Now you have to understand, this was in the late 70s into the 80s, and Fresno was about 1/3 the size of it is now. It's, population-wise, it wasn't very big, and it's a substantial part of the population. In today's environment, people that are interested in church growth would stand up and take notice of what Reverend Don had manifested here in Fresno. And the key thing that he shared with me during our talks was teaching people how to demonstrate principle in their lives. For him, that was the most significant thing. And talking to people later on that had been part of Reverend Don's church or center, whatever you want to call it, one of their complaints was that you would get people that would come to Reverend Don's church. They would learn how to put this principle into practice in their life. They'd learn how to demonstrate that job or demonstrate that car or relationship or friendship or whatever it was that they wanted. And once they felt fairly comfortable in their ability to demonstrate, they would go back to the church, their home church or religious faith that they'd been in before they came to religious science. And it angered people. My take on it is I'm real happy with that, and I'm good with it. You know, I don't care what someone believes insofar as their relationship with divine principle. That's their personal belief, and I don't believe that there's any particular right or wrong belief, even for those that choose not to believe, because that's where they're at this point in time. But no matter whether you don't believe in a divine principle or whether you believe in a very secularized or a very fundamentalist type of divine principle, it doesn't make any difference. The mere fact that you take and put principle or practices into your life that allow you to see God's good being demonstrated in your life, and I don't care if you call that the power of positive thinking or whatever else, it doesn't make any difference. We're still seeing God expressed in your life, and at some level, that expression through you is having an impact in the world. And ultimately, again, I believe that that's where Dr. Holmes was going with this concept of New Thought having an impact in the world. Now, I read somewhere, and it's been a long time ago, and I don't remember where it was, but something about him believing that if we got to a certain percentage in the world of people that had a New Thought type of consciousness, that the world would change almost instantaneously. And if you're familiar with the Ken Kai's book, The 100th Monkey, or Rupert Sheldrake and the things he's talked about, or the Maharishi effect, then you'll have an understanding of what it is that I'm talking about. And I was talking about it to somebody this morning, and that's what brought it to mind. But I found in a little book called Love and Law, which is a collection of unpublished early transcriptions of Ernest Holmes' talks, I found this. And he says, when the human race with consciousness says and believes that evil will cease to exist, it will disappear. It will be neutralized when 51% of the human race says and believes that, and because the majority will be on the side of light, light will be shown. That's the power that we bring. Most people don't think about that. They think about their personal relationship and what that means to them, and maybe their spiritual celebration. But the true power behind this is the recognition by humanity as a whole to the truth of this divine principle. I'm running a little late. We're going to take our next break, and I'll see you when I get back. We're going to start in on chapter 16 in the textbook. If you've got one, pull it out. You'll have time. See you then.
Linda Lee Kane is an author of fantasies, thrillers, contemporary fiction, and children's books. Order a book by Linda Lee Kane on Amazon or on lindaleekane.com. Call Paul Bonander of Bonander Real Estate to buy this beautiful 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom home at 3486 Mecca Avenue in Clovis. Call 559-246-6731 for all your real estate needs. The Saga of Bridget and Amanda by Carol Love Forbes brings to life the struggles of historical women in early America. Find The Saga of Bridget and Amanda on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and order your copy today.
CentralValleyTalk.com.
Welcome back to New Thought Talk. I'm your host, the Reverend Steve Walling from the Spiritual Awareness Center located in Fresno, California. So here we are. I'm at chapter 16 in what we call the textbook, which is The Science of Mind, written by Dr. Ernest Holmes, written as a guide to putting these principles into practice in your life, explaining divine principle, our relationship, just a lot of good stuff. And if you're a New Thought person, maybe not associated with religious science, it'd still be a good reference book for you to have. I read something out of it every day and sometimes several times a day. But today I want to talk about, and this came to me this morning, the title of this chapter is Principles of Successful Living, because that's what attracts a lot of people to New Thought to begin with. Successful living being abundant, prosperous in our financial life, prosperous in our relationships, and on and on. But Holmes opens this chapter with a very important discussion. And he says, lessons on prosperity and mental control of conditions are sometimes dangerous because of the misunderstanding of this subject. Science of Mind is not a get-rich-quick scheme. Neither does it promise something for nothing. It does, however, promise that the one who will comply with its teachings, that he or she shall be able to bring greater possibilities and happier conditions into their experience. We do not teach that you can get what you want. If we could get all that we want, it might be disastrous, for it is certain that most of us would want things that would interfere with the well-being of someone else. And right off the get, if you understand that when he says what we want may interfere with someone else, he's not talking just about material things. He's talking about our personal judgments, with what we judge to be what is good or what is right or what is correct. One of the things that, as a New Thought religious science person, when we do our spiritual practice, when we go into the silence, when we do our affirmative prayer treatment, one of the things that we understand that is important, that when we are seeking to create greater good in our life, simultaneously, at the same time, we need to be seeking greater good in the lives of others. That's not a select group of others that we decide that are part of our tribe, but others as general whole, as humanity. Humanity has we've talked about this, over the eons, has evolved and become more at a higher level of consciousness, more enlightened, but this thing that we call race consciousness still holds within it a lot of stuff that we see demonstrated in the world, things that oftentimes we see demonstrated in our life that we're not necessarily happy with, but it shows up. But as we begin to seek greater good for our life expression and seek it for others at the same time, have you ever considered, as you're doing your personal spiritual work, including someone that maybe you just had that, whatever that is with, that is really the irritant in your consciousness, that the mere mention of their name may seek to anger you from the inside out. Creating a calmness within yourself, creating a space within yourself where you recognize the divine love principle expressing in you, and then seeing that within yourself as that other individual. Blessing them, holding them in that light, loving your neighbor as you love God and loving God with all that you are, and loving yourself. Forgiving them and forgiving yourself. Opening yourself up to the realization of the divine principle of greater good expressing through you into life in general. As you do that, as you make that part of your daily spiritual practice, this shift that I was talking about earlier within you takes place, and we begin to see people that at one time we may have included them in something we might call the opposition. Now that could be siblings, it can be family, it can be, however you want to define that. I'm not speaking to any specific situation, but we see individuals as the opposition, maybe for something we want or maybe for something we want to see. But now we see them as part of the wholeness that we're a part of, this loving presence. Maybe sometimes just in that seeing, the energy that is responsive to that, the God presence, the law that responds, may open us up to something that we hadn't considered. We may see something in them that we hadn't considered. The whole expression may change. For sure it won't change if we see them and hold to that tightness that we can get, that they are the whatever they are, and that they need to whatever they need to. But we can leave that aside. We can move to something greater. We can move to something better. And as we do, life changes. Not just our life, but life in general. I want to read on a little bit more. If you've got the textbook, go back and read chapter 16 again and again and again. You can't read it enough. There's just a whole wealth of information in here. He says, we could not expect to demonstrate that which is contrary to the nature of our own existence. That which is contrary to the nature of our own existence. Our existence is the God principle expressing as us. We not only believe, but we know that it is entirely possible through mental treatment, through right thought and belief, to greatly influence our environment, its reaction to us, the situations we meet, and the conditions we contact. And that's what we were just talking about. There is such a thing as demonstrating a control of conditions. We shall be able to prove this in such a degree as we are successful in looking away from conditions which now exist while accepting better ones. Not only must we accept this intellectually, but our acceptance must become a subjective embodiment of which the intellect furnishes but a mental picture. We have to, people, oftentimes they think, well, if I say the words, if I've got the knowledge that the treatment's going to demonstrate, and they say the words, they have the knowledge, and they find that they're still waiting. And they're still waiting. Now, something maybe happened, but not that which they had spoken their word for, if you will. That's because they have kept themselves separate between their heart and their mind. We have to, when I use the idea of the heart is our beingness, our center, if you will. When we speak our word, it's got to be from the heart. We have to open ourselves up. We cannot be in a consciousness of trying to control things or people to do what we want to see done in our life. What we do is we open ourselves up to the level of acceptance of God's good demonstrated in our life. And if what we are speaking our word for hurts no one, takes from no one, creates greater good in our life experience at the level that we believe, we will see it unfold in our life. Holmes believed that. Matter of fact, I was listening to Ernest Holmes on my drive down here today, and that's not because I was channeling Ernest Holmes, because I don't do that. But if you have internet available, and I assume you do because you're watching this, you can go to YouTube, and there are a lot of talks that Ernest Holmes gave through his television show or his radio show. And you listen to them, and okay, in today's world, they are maybe a little quaint, antiquated, if you will. But listen to the intent and to the information that he's talking about. Because this is a man that spent his entire life almost in the search of a spiritual understanding of a greater good. He wrote his first book in about 1918, and he made his transition in 1960. And during that time, all those years, he never stopped learning. He never stopped growing. He never stopped seeking to create a better world, and he taught that to people. The gift that he brought into the world, he shared, and he shared unselfishly with people. Sometimes today, I think, as we look at our spiritual practices, we may have shifted away from his embodiment and understanding of the concept of what he called spiritual mind healing. Spiritual mind healing is not faith healing. It's not willing something to happen. It's coming to an understanding of truth in ourself at the level of our beingness and seeing it expressed. As Thomas Trord used to say, to the extent that we can be in the absolute and not in the relative, to that extent we're not in the relative and we're in the absolute. I'm kind of paraphrasing. And what he meant by that, the relative being the physical world expression, that which our five senses tell us is the world. The absolute being the divine principle, that which is behind, that which is the perfection of all that is, that which is the source of all that is, that which is the power of all that is. When we bring our consciousness to the acceptance of this absolute, we slip from our bondage of the relative. Society doesn't raise us up this way. We don't teach our children to have this kind of understanding. And until you reach a point to where you discover in your life that which is within you that is seeking to express itself, that urge within you that's seeking to express itself in the life of you, through you, you may not even be aware that it's there. And people go through their lives without ever really opening up to it. But it is there in each and every one of us. It cannot not be there. So anyway, it's time for our third break. I'll see you when we come back. I hope you've enjoyed this. This is kind of just a stream of consciousness stuff today. But we'll finish up in this last segment. See you then.
Looking to remodel your home? Contact Max Meza, owner of Precise Construction. Max is the contractor with a heart who will make sure the job is done right and you're happy with the end result. Need something repaired? Call Precise Construction at 559-477-3899 or email constructionprecise76@gmail.com. Lease or buy this modern two-story Spanish-style building with private offices, open workspace, 2 restrooms, and a break room. This commercial office building is located at 10 East Olive in the Tower District. The floor plan is designed for easy conversion, and all interior walls are movable. Parking available in the rear in a fence-secure lot. Call Mike Briggs Properties at 559-486-6758 or visit MikeBriggsProperties.com. The Narrow Gauge Inn is your home away from home with 26 rooms offering majestic mountain views, private decks, and an atmosphere of true relaxation. Located just 4 miles from the south entrance to Yosemite National Park, the Narrow Gauge Inn is the perfect base for all your Yosemite adventures. Make your reservation now at narrowgaugeinn.com or call 559-683-7720.
This segment is brought to you by Mike Briggs Properties. The recession's over. It's now safe to sell your home. Call Mike Briggs Properties.
CentralValleyTalk.com.
Welcome back to New Thought Talk. I am your host, the Reverend Steve Walling, from the Spiritual Awareness Center located in Fresno, California. I hope you've enjoyed my wanderings today, kind of sharing some of these things. You know, sometimes just at the right point in the right time, you might hear something, and I hope that's what happens today, that will trigger something within you to maybe take that next step or be a little more diligent in your spiritual practices, or reaffirm to yourself, understand the goodness that is the godness within you. It's awesome stuff. It really is. I want to read on here. Consequently, he says, this science, the science of mind, science of life, does not promise something for nothing. It does, however, tell us that if we comply with the law complies with us. No man or woman can demonstrate peace and cling to unhappiness. He or she can demonstrate resignation and call it peace, but it will not be peace. No person can jump into the water and remain dry. This is contrary to the law of reason. No person whose entire time is spent in the contemplation of limitation can demonstrate freedom from such limitation. The law itself must be willing to give, because in so giving, the law is self-expressed. The law will give to us exactly what we put into it. If we bring limitation, it gives us back limitation. If we bring angst and anxiety, we get a lot of that back. Not necessarily what most of us are seeking for in our life. You know, most of us want to be happy, content, but in that happiness and in that contentment, we want to be able to look out into the world and see a world that is peopled with happiness and contentment. We have to understand that our definition of happiness is strictly ours, that someone else's definition might be theirs, and as long as it harms no one, there's probably room for it in life. It seems that it's an inherent part of human nature to want to tell people what they need to believe, how they need to believe it or act. And once again, how they do that is an expression of their individualism. And their individualism is the divine principle expressing as them. We don't want to see a world where people are without. We don't want to see a world where people are hurt, intentionally or even accidentally. We don't want to see a world where people live in poverty. We don't want to see a world where people control other people. I don't know the answer necessarily to that specifically, but I do believe, along with Dr. Holmes, that when we reach a level of 51% or greater of the human race having a consciousness that God is good, and we can stop there or we could go on. God is good and God is all that is. That what we see in the world today will no longer be. You can't look out in the world today and not realize that we've reached a level in humanity where we have everything that we could need to take care of every human being, at least at the level of their basic needs and maybe beyond. But we also have to understand that life, the principle of life is to live, and in that living, life needs to be challenged at some level. Not challenged beyond its ability to respond, but challenged at a level where it can seek accomplishment, if you will. There's nothing greater in our life experience than to be challenged by something and to face that challenge and to rise victoriously over it and stand there and know that we've done the right thing, we've experienced the right thing, we brought the right thing in the world. It's a very powerful feeling. Each one of us. And the purpose, when I first started doing this show, and it's been quite a few years now, was to share the concepts of New Thought to people that understood them and for for people that maybe don't understand them. Maybe this might be the first time that you've ever heard or come into contact with this type of a way of thinking. There's a lot of information out on the internet today. Recently, we've been incorporated into the New Thought channel, and I feel very honored and humbled by that. You can go there, but there's so many other people and so many other teachers there, but we're not talking about just that. The sources on the internet are vast. You can find writings from early New Thought pioneers. You can find, like I said earlier, you can find recordings of Dr. Ernest Holmes. And he's not the only one. Neville is out there, and if you're not familiar with Neville, look him up. He's got a lot of good stuff. There's other teachers, Joel Goldsmith. There's people from the Unity movement like Charles and Myrtle Fillmore and Eric Butterworth, and I could spend the whole rest of this time talking about the resources that are out there. And I encourage you to take time, even if you're part of the New Thought religious science community, and seek out resources that maybe you've not utilized in your journey. There'll be different takes on things that maybe something that in your understanding you didn't quite get, and you read or you listen to somebody else, and finally it makes that connection. Because making those connections within each and every one of us, each one of those connections that we make that brings us into a greater realization, a greater understanding of our relationship with and to the divine principle, that infiniteness that we call God, that love principle that is the creativeness of all that is, and understanding it as our life expression, and where we fit in with that, as that, and how we can embody that understanding and be a co-creator, if you will, with the divine principle in our life. And I don't like co-creator necessarily, because that kind of gives an idea of one and. We're not one and. When I say co-creator, let's say we take the role of director with the gift of life and consciousness that God has given us and expresses through us. There is an infiniteness of good. When we believe it, it becomes available to us at the level of our belief. As I was listening to Dr. Holmes on my way down here today, the particular program that he was talking about, he said, it's done unto us as we believe. The teaching comes from Jesus, and he says it's done unto us as we believe. And Holmes points out that done and as become two very powerful concepts. Done is being unfolded within our life, but the as is where we sit in our belief. As we believe to a great extent, if we believe to a lesser extent. And the belief, and this is where a lot of what I talked about today becomes very important. The belief is very intimately tied to our consciousness of acceptance of the allness that is. Because to the extent that we limit our acceptance, to that extent we also limit our belief. Our belief is in an infiniteness, but if I'm not willing to accept the infiniteness as it is, then I begin to set up limitations in my life. That tends to be one of the factors that hold a lot of people back. Taking time every day to just meditate on the divine principle of love and forgiveness, seeking to see how in our individual life expression we have gotten caught up with things that we didn't realize that we still held. I was talking to someone this morning, and it's someone that we've had a relationship for quite a few years, and he was sharing with me that something happened. We didn't get into particulars, but something happened very recently that brought a realization to him that where he thought he was at, he hadn't quite reached that level of enlightenment, we'll say. And it's not a point to be mocked or condemned. It's a point that we all have that. I'm continually amazed at some of the things that I find expressing in my mind when I least expect it. But not only am I amazed, but I take note, and I go back and I work on it. And that's what we do. We were created in perfection, but our expression in this physical plane has been encapsulated with so much that has kept us in a consciousness of separateness. But once we realize, once we begin to see and seek what we call truth teaching, begins to fall away. There is but one, only one. I and my Father are one. That's the teaching. That's for you, that's for me, that's the good in our life. There is a promise in the creation of humanity. I believe that with all that I am. And that promise is that ultimately we will reach that point, 51% plus, and the world is going to change. The world is changing, and it's changing as I speak these words, and that is exciting. So that's it for this week. My friends, I hope you've enjoyed this. Like I say, this was just kind of a rambling of things that I had on my mind. I hope that you found some things in there that you can use or references that you might fall back on. If you have any questions, you can always contact me through email. You can check in with me on Facebook. It's Steve Walling. I'm there. And I do respond. I appreciate the comments that we've got and the questions that have been asked. And I look forward to seeing you again next week. As you go through the week, know that the light of God surrounds you, the love of God enfolds you, and the power of God protects you. The presence of God watches over you, because truly, wherever you are, God is there. All is well. Make it a great week. It's your choice. And I'll see you then. Bye.
Prepare to be amazed by the magic of Elder. Kyle Elder is a fantastic entertainer who has been studying magic for over 20 years. Book Kyle and the Magic of Elder for your event, large or small. Kyle will make you laugh and mesmerize you with his magic. For more information or a free quote, visit magicofelder.com or call 559-917-4543. Kristen McIntosh is a real estate broker who prides herself on providing the highest level of service to her customers. Her enthusiasm for achieving desired results is an asset to her clients. Contact Kristen at 559-419-0333 and visit KristenMcIntosh.com. Voir dire, An Oath to Tell and Seek the Truth by Santiago Camarena, depicts the vicious cycle of drugs, crime, and incarceration. It argues that the media, politics, and our laws systematically contribute to this cycle. Get your copy of Voir dire at VoirDireStory.com.
CentralValleyTalk.com